When my brother first announced his engagement, the entire family was overjoyed. We had known his fiancée only for a short time, but she seemed charming at first, always smiling, always polite, and endlessly enthusiastic about her upcoming wedding. My parents started talking about traditions, my aunts started planning outfits, and the mood in our home was nothing short of festive. Everyone believed this wedding would be a celebration of love, joy, and togetherness. But little did we know, beneath that sweet exterior, something darker was waiting to surface. The first sign came just weeks after the engagement. Instead of simple requests, she began presenting demands. Grand, expensive, and completely unrealistic. She wanted her wedding gown to be flown in from Italy, custom, made by a famous designer, with intricate hand-stitched embroidery. It wasn't just costly, it was the kind of dress people reserved for royalty. My brother, blinded by love, agreed instantly, while the rest of us exchanged uneasy glances. It felt as though she wasn't planning a marriage, she was planning a performance. Soon, the demands grew bolder. She insisted the ceremony take place at an exclusive venue that had a 2-year waiting list, and when told it wasn't possible, she burst into tears until my brother promised to make it happen somehow. She wanted rare orchids from Thailand, a cake taller than the groom himself, and a guest list of people none of us had even heard of. Slowly, what was supposed to be a family gathering of love turned into a staged spectacle where nothing felt genuine anymore. At first, we thought maybe she was just nervous or overwhelmed by wedding pressure. After all, planning can drive anyone a little crazy. But her attitude shifted from being polite to controlling. She dismissed my mother's suggestions, mocked my father's attempts to keep things traditional, and even rolled her eyes whenever my brother spoke about keeping things simple. Every conversation became centered around her. Her vision, her desires, her rules. If anyone disagreed, she would either break down in fake tears or throw a tantrum until she got her way. The tension in the house became unbearable. Family members who once laughed together now whispered in corners, afraid to speak openly about her outrageous behavior. Still, no one dared confront her directly, because my brother defended her every single time. He kept repeating, "It's her special day. Just let her have what she wants." But what none of us realized back then was that this wasn't just about a wedding. This was only the beginning of something far more disturbing. It happened during what was supposed to be a normal family dinner. Everyone had gathered around the table, trying to enjoy a rare evening together without wedding talk dominating every conversation. My father was telling one of his old stories. My mother was passing around dishes, and for a brief moment, it almost felt like the tension had lifted. But just as laughter began to fill the room, my sister-in-law cleared her throat and made an announcement that silenced us all. She looked directly at me, her eyes sharp, and said she wanted me to cut my hair I had grown and cared for since childhood. Not only cut it short, but also dye it jet black before the wedding. The reason, according to her, my long hair and natural look would steal attention from her on the big day. At first, I thought she was joking. I even laughed nervously, waiting for her to smile and say she was kidding. But the smile never came. She was dead serious, and the firmness in her tone left no room for doubt. The room froze. My mother's fork clinked against her plate. My father raised his eyebrows in disbelief, and my brother shifted uncomfortably in his chair. I stared at her, stunned, unable to process what I had just heard. Out of all the absurd demands she had made, this one felt deeply personal, like she wanted to erase a part of me for her own vanity. It wasn't about flowers or gowns anymore. It was about control. When I didn't immediately respond, she doubled down. She launched into a rehearsed speech about how the bride should be the most beautiful woman in the room, and how any distraction would be disrespectful to her. She insisted it was just a small sacrifice for the sake of her happiness, even daring to say it would show how much I truly supported their marriage. My stomach turned at her words, but worse than that was watching my brother silently nod, too afraid, or too blind, to disagree with her. I tried to laugh it off, saying I would never change something so personal just to please someone else. But her face darkened instantly, and the atmosphere shifted from awkward to hostile. She leaned closer, almost whispering, and said if I didn't comply, she might have to rethink my place in the wedding party. The message was clear. It wasn't a request. It was an ultimatum, and in that moment, I realized we were dealing with someone far more dangerous than just a demanding bride to be. After the shocking hair demand, things only grew worse. What once seemed like isolated moments of selfishness quickly spiraled into a pattern of absolute control. She no longer made requests. She issued orders, delivered with the kind of confidence that dared anyone to challenge her. My brother, caught between his love for her and his loyalty to the family, became a silent spectator. And with every moment of silence, she grew bolder, as if feeding off our unwillingness to stand up to her. Her obsession with perfection started infecting every corner of the wedding plans. She issued a strict list of colors that guests were forbidden to wear. Anything remotely resembling white, ivory, or even pastel shades was banned. I must stand out, she said coldly, as though the idea of someone else looking beautiful at her wedding was an act of betrayal. Then came the decree that no children were allowed at the ceremony, because in her words, crying babies ruin the magic. It wasn't just inconsiderate. It was cruel, especially to family members with young kids. Her fixation soon turned on the bridesmaids. She handpicked them, but then started criticizing their appearances in ways that left them humiliated. She demanded one lose weight before the wedding, told another to change her hairstyle, and ordered them all to wear identical shoes that cost more than most of them could afford. It wasn't about friendship or honor. It was about control and dominance, molding everyone into her vision of a flawless backdrop. Behind closed doors, family members began whispering about her behavior. I overheard my aunts questioning whether my brother truly knew the woman he was marrying, while cousins mocked her behind her back. Yet, no matter how ridiculous her demands became, no one confronted her directly. It was as though we were all trapped in her game, afraid that speaking out might break the fragile peace, or worse, trigger another meltdown that my brother would rush to defend. The more power she gained, the more dangerous she became. She started speaking as though the wedding wasn't just her special day, but her kingdom. Anyone who disagreed was branded unsupportive or jealous. What chilled me most was how quickly she could switch between sweet charm in public and cold cruelty in private. It was like watching two different people, one who smiled for the cameras and one who sharpened her claws when no one was looking. And yet, my brother couldn't, or wouldn't, see it. One afternoon, I was reluctantly helping her organize decorations in the guest room. She had left me with a pile of ribbons and place cards while she rushed off to take a phone call. The room was cluttered with shopping bags, fabric swatches, and boxes stacked to the ceiling. As I tried to make space on the desk, a leather-bound notebook slipped out from under a stack of wedding magazines and fell open on the floor. At first, I thought it was just a planner, but the moment my eyes landed on the pages, I realized it was something far more disturbing. Each page was filled with lists, but not the kind you'd expect from a bride-to-be. These weren't just notes about flowers or seating charts. Instead, they read like instructions, strict rules for every member of the family. Some were bizarrely specific, like forbidding my mother from wearing jewelry too shiny, and insisting my father keep his speeches under 2 minutes. Others were downright cruel. She had written that one cousin should not be photographed because she was too distracting, and another should be seated far away to avoid spoiling the pictures. But what sent a chill down my spine were the pages about my brother. She had written bullet points under the heading "How to Keep Him in Line." There were notes about monitoring his phone, limiting his visits with his friends, and even suggestions on how to guilt him into spending more money. One line, circled in red ink, read, "Control the money. Control the man." It wasn't a bride planning a wedding. It was a woman plotting how to take control of every corner of his life. My hands trembled as I flipped through more pages. The notebook detailed manipulative tactics that went beyond the wedding. She had instructions for isolating him from his old college friends, encouraging him to avoid family dinners, and making sure he relied only on her for decision-making. It was terrifying to see how carefully she had thought it all out, as though she had been planning this long before the engagement was even official. The handwriting was neat, deliberate, and laced with a cold determination that made my skin crawl. When I heard her footsteps approaching the hallway, I quickly shoved the notebook back under the magazines and pretended to be busy tying ribbons. My heart pounded, but I forced a smile as she walked back into the room, oblivious to what I had just discovered. That moment changed everything for me. I no longer saw her as just a controlling bride with ridiculous demands. I saw her for what she truly was, someone dangerous, manipulative, and willing to do whatever it took to tighten her grip on my brother and our family. The tension had been simmering for weeks, but it finally boiled over one evening when she called for a family meeting. We all gathered in the living room, expecting yet another list of demands about the flowers or the menu. But this time, her tone was sharper, colder. She stood in the center of the room like a queen addressing her subjects, her eyes scanning each of us, as if daring us to argue. When she finally spoke, her words left the entire family stunned. She announced that the wedding could no longer go forward unless my parents agreed to sell a piece of our family land. The land wasn't just property. It was a legacy, something that had been in our family for generations. My father's face immediately tightened. My mother's hands began to tremble, and I felt my stomach twist into knots. She claimed the money was necessary to fund the grand wedding she deserved, dismissing every concern about how much was already being spent. To her, it wasn't about tradition or family pride. It was about spectacle and nothing else. When my father calmly explained that the land was not for sale under any circumstances, she exploded. Her face turned red, her voice rose into a shrill scream, and she accused us all of being selfish and unsupportive. She shouted that we were trying to ruin her day, and that if the family truly loved my brother, we would make the sacrifice for his happiness. It was a chilling manipulation tactic, twisting love into a weapon. My brother sat silently beside her, visibly torn, his hands clenched in his lap as he avoided making eye contact with anyone. The argument dragged on, with her pacing the room, throwing her hands in the air, and demanding we reconsider. At one point, she even threatened to cancel the wedding altogether if her demands weren't met. But none of us could believe what we were hearing. Who threatens to end a marriage over money and land? My mother quietly wiped away tears, my father sat in stony silence, and I could feel the air in the room grow heavier with every passing second. The woman who once pretended to be sweet and caring now revealed her true self, and it was terrifying. That night, I realized this wasn't about a wedding anymore. It wasn't about flowers, dresses, or guest lists. It was about control, manipulation, and power. She wasn't satisfied with dictating the color of our clothes or the length of our speeches. Now she wanted to take away something sacred, something that didn't belong to her. It was the moment I knew the line had been crossed. Something had to give, and soon, because if it didn't, my family would lose far more than just land. I couldn't stay silent any longer. The notebook I had found, the outrageous demands, and now the attempt to strip our family of land that held generations of memories. It was too much. I waited until my brother was alone one evening, sitting quietly on the back porch with a drink in his hand. His shoulders were slumped, his face pale, as though the weight of the world had settled on him. For a moment, I hesitated, unsure if speaking up would drive him further into her grip. But then I took a deep breath, sat down beside him, and slid the notebook across the table. At first, he didn't want to look. He pushed it away, muttering that I was being dramatic, that people were just misunderstanding her. But when I insisted, when I flipped open the pages and pointed out the rules, the manipulations, and the sinister phrase about controlling the money, I saw something shift in his eyes. His jaw tightened, his brows furrowed, and for the first time, doubt began to creep in. Still, he resisted, saying maybe it was just her way of being organized. His denial cut me deeply, but I knew he was struggling with a truth he didn't want to face. The real turning point came by accident. A few days later, he returned home earlier than expected and overheard her on the phone with a friend. I watched from the kitchen doorway as he stood frozen, listening to her laugh about milking his family dry and bragging that she would never have to lift a finger once she had his ring on her finger. The color drained from his face. He didn't storm in, didn't shout. He just walked away quietly, his expression blank, as though something inside him had finally broken. That night, he didn't eat, didn't speak, and barely looked at anyone. I could see the conflict raging inside him. The man who had defended her to the bitter end was now confronted with undeniable proof. The silence between us was heavy, filled with all the words he couldn't bring himself to say. When I finally asked him what he was thinking, his answer was simple, almost whispered. "I don't know if I even know her anymore." Hearing those words sent a chill down my spine, because I knew then that he had finally seen what I had seen all along. But the confrontation wasn't over, not by a long shot. Showing him the notebook and letting him overhear her lies had only planted the seed of doubt. What would happen when he finally confronted her face to face? What would she do when she realized her carefully crafted mask was slipping? I could feel the storm building, and deep down, I knew it was only a matter of time before everything came crashing down. Just days before the wedding, everything unraveled in the most unexpected way. The house was buzzing with last-minute chaos, guests confirming flights, decorators rushing around, and my mother desperately trying to hold the family together. In the middle of all this noise, she disappeared. No one saw her leave, no one heard the door, and no one noticed anything unusual until hours later, when my brother tried to call her and found her phone switched off. At first, we assumed it was another one of her dramatic episodes. But as the hours turned into a full night without a word, unease began to sink in. Her absence was strange, but what we found in her room was stranger. Half the closet was empty, with dresses and shoes missing. A suitcase lay open on the bed, only partially packed, as though she had left in a hurry. Scattered on the dresser were receipts, but not for wedding items. These were for expensive purchases we had never heard about, along with a printed confirmation for a one-way plane ticket to another country. The destination wasn't glamorous or romantic. It was somewhere far away, almost as if she wanted to disappear completely. The worst discovery came next. My brother, pale and trembling, checked his wallet and bank statements. His credit card was missing. The receipts we had found suddenly made sense. It wasn't just her money she had been spending. She had been draining him dry behind his back, funding her escape with his savings while convincing him, and the rest of us, to sacrifice even more. Each line on the bank statement was like a knife, cutting deeper into the illusion he had clung to for so long. Shock rippled through the family. My mother sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the suitcase as though it were a coffin holding the death of our hopes. My father paced the room, muttering under his breath, trying to piece together how we had all been so blind. And my brother, he said nothing. He simply stood there, gripping the receipt for the plane ticket in his shaking hands, his eyes glassy and distant. The woman he thought he was going to marry had betrayed him in the cruelest way possible, vanishing not only with his trust, but with his money. The wedding was officially over before it even began. Guests would be arriving in 2 days, expecting a celebration that would never happen. Rumors began spreading among relatives. Questions filled the air, and yet no one had any answers. Where had she gone? Why had she chosen to leave so suddenly? And most chilling of all, had this been her plan from the very beginning? In the end, my brother was left broken, heart shattered, reputation bruised, and finances nearly ruined. The wedding that was supposed to be the happiest day of his life became nothing more than a ghost, a reminder of how blind love can make someone. As for her, she vanished without a trace, leaving behind nothing but questions, betrayal, and a trail of lies. Some say she never even intended to marry him at all, that the wedding was just a smokescreen for her scheme. And as I look back on everything, I can't help but wonder, did we uncover her plan too late? Or did she know all along that we eventually would? Maybe that's why she left so suddenly, because she was always one step ahead. What still haunts me is the thought that somewhere out there, she might be preparing for her next target, her next perfect wedding, her next victim. So, when people ask me why I tell this story, the answer is simple. It's not just a warning about bridezillas or controlling relationships. It's a reminder that sometimes the person you think you know best might be hiding a side of themselves you never imagined. And by the time the mask slips, it might already be too late.
If you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Most importantly, subscribe and hit the bell icon so the next secret finds you first.